4 years post-breakup, I still ache for my first love. No other relationship ignites my heart like hers. I'm lost. How to move on? This will be a lengthy entry, but I believe it is essential for anyone reading this to grasp why moving on has been such a challenge for me. At the age of 14, I found myself in a psychiatric facility due to a suicide attempt. This would become a recurring theme throughout my adolescent years. While I was there, I met a young man whom I will refer to as N. He was among the first individuals in my life with whom I felt a genuine connection or shared thoughts. He stated that he had borderline personality disorder. I spent a considerable amount of time with him, but he often discussed a girl whom I shall call L. He frequently expressed how she was his best friend and how he deeply loved his girlfriend. This was somewhat irritating, yet I wished to maintain our friendship, so I chose to overlook it. Eventually, we both left the hospital and continued to communicate via text. However, one day everything erupted. He launched into a tirade about his desire to attempt again, and for some inexplicable reason, added me and another girl to a group chat with a farewell message. He left us to converse on our own. To this day, I remain puzzled about why he included me in a conversation with this unfamiliar person. We began chatting, and I discovered that this girl was, in fact, L, the one he had always mentioned. I also learned that she was not his girlfriend and that he relentlessly stalked and emotionally manipulated her. I felt compelled to create some distance between them, as I could see how distressed she was, and I assumed that was the end of it. However, she continued to text me. For several months, I was periodically hospitalized due to overdoses and attempts, and with each return from the hospital, I would find a text from her. It felt unusual, as no one had made such an effort to connect with me up to that point. I was uncertain about how to reply. Nonetheless, at a certain stage, I realized I enjoyed it and I was beginning to like her as well. So I eventually surrendered to it. From that moment forward, we spent every day together on FaceTime. We would text throughout the day and late into the night. She lived an hour away, which, as a child, felt like being on another continent, so we had to work with what we had. Gradually, I came to realize I had feelings for her. I had never encountered someone so full of life, kindness, and humor. We felt like we were meant for each other. I still believe we are. After about 6 months, we coincidentally found ourselves at the same amusement park on the same day. Neither of us had any idea, but we had corresponded so frequently that we eventually discovered it later that afternoon. As soon as I realized, I abandoned everything I was doing and dashed across the park to see her. I vividly recall leaping over a fence like a monkey as she was situated in a different section of the larger park and trying to reach through to her. We were both ecstatic. Eventually, I asked my brother to bring me my pass so I could enter her side of the park, and we immediately embraced. To this day, I cannot recall ever feeling that much excitement to see anyone. We ended up sitting beneath a tree near the entrance, conversing. We were both quite nervous. We were just kids. After a while of chatting, I wrapped my arm around her, and she leaned against me. After some time, I found myself standing up and pacing around as we continued our conversation. A little while later, I leaned in to kiss her. It was her first kiss, and it felt like mine as well. Shortly after we kissed, her phone started ringing. Her friends were searching for her, and she needed to leave. We were running through the park in the midst of the night, just as the fireworks began to ignite the sky. We were nearly at the center of the park when she suddenly halted. She said, "Wait," and I braced myself for whatever would happen next. Just as the fireworks erupted behind her, she leaned in and kissed me again. A heartbeat later, we took off running once more. When we located her friends, I let her go and slipped away into the night. In the months that followed, the only opportunity we had to see each other in person was in the basement restroom of a hospital. Her parents wouldn't permit her to go anywhere, but she volunteered at the hospital. Some days, she would feign checking in and hide with me in the basement restroom to spend time together. I would bring thick blankets to cover the entire room, creating a clean space for us. Fortunately, very few people were aware of this restroom's existence, so it was always kept tidy. On her birthday, I baked her a cake, and we enjoyed it inside. We would bring McDonald's and share chicken nuggets. We also lost our virginity there. I remember midway through, she stopped me to say she loved me. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, and one dripped onto her face. I recall her surprise, and then she began to cry too. I remember our first experience with marijuana together. She was frightened, but by that time, I was quite experienced. I had intended to smoke on the grass in the park, but suddenly, it began to rain heavily. We grabbed our belongings and dashed under a baseball cage we discovered. We were freezing, so we huddled beneath a blanket for warmth. Eventually, she decided she was willing to try some of what I had. She took her first puff, and after a few minutes, she erupted into uncontrollable laughter. She giggled while gazing out at the pouring rain. I remember her looking at me, smiling and exclaiming, "I want to dance." Without hesitation, she dashed into the rain and mud, twirled around, and laughed in the downpour. I could compose an entire book about her and what we shared. However, I believe these details should suffice to help someone understand. Naturally, we are no longer together. We actually broke up multiple times during our relationship. Now that I am older, I recognize it was primarily my fault. I cheated on her because of my insecurities. I struggled to say no when other girls expressed interest in me. As a child, I felt very unloved and yearned for even a small amount of affection from anyone. This, of course, caused her great pain. I was also quite angry, and I still am. I have experienced considerable trauma in my life, and even now I struggle to process it. As a child, I was simply intolerable. Now I find myself quiet and hollow. After what felt like 100 breakups, we finally ended things in 2020. About 9 months later, I was practically pleading for her to take me back. By then, however, she had met someone new whom she cared for. She told me she wished that I had reached out earlier because perhaps things would have turned out differently. We continued to communicate for a long period. In fact, I messaged her just last night after a span of 8 months without contact. She responded promptly, which she always does regardless of how much time has passed. Whenever we engage in lengthy conversations, we grow closer and share more. This time, she inquired if I was single, stating that she was as well. Over the past 4 years, she has often mentioned that she views me as her one true love, and that she doubts she could ever experience that again, yet she insists she cannot reunite with me. There were occasions when she almost got back together with me. She even kissed me a year after our breakup. Nevertheless, she ultimately retreats and maintains that a reconciliation is not in our future. I honestly do not know how else to express this, but I feel that the relationship has left me shattered. It resembles the way people describe addiction to heroin. It paralyzes my mind, making it impossible for anything else to provide the satisfaction that the relationship once did. Life thereafter feels lackluster without her presence. Nothing ignites a spark within me, nothing drives me. I find it incredibly difficult to live unless she is part of it. It feels as if my heart and mind remain stuck in that time, and nothing can pull me away. Since then, I have dated. I have had 2 long-term relationships, one lasted 9 months, and another extended almost 3 years on and off. I actually ended things with my girlfriend on Valentine's Day this year. It is a complex story, but we have been through a lot together. I simply cannot shake the feeling that no relationship has matched what I had with her. It is not about love. My last 2 girlfriends adored me, and I loved them in return. My current girlfriend is enduring tremendous challenges to be with me, but it just doesn't compare. I have diligently attempted to forget my ex, to move forward, to have different expectations in relationships, yet the experience has altered me significantly. My understanding of love has evolved into something profound and passionate. Nothing I have encountered since has fulfilled my heart, and I consistently feel that any new relationships are merely pale imitations. It seems impossible for me to feel joy, security, or comprehension. So, what am I supposed to do now? How can I advance in my life when I feel this way? I have been in and out of therapy for a decade, and I continue to feel the same. Additionally, I cannot prevent myself from messaging her again. Throughout the years, I have made numerous attempts to build new relationships and forge a new life for myself without her. But no matter how many people I date or how many friends I cultivate, nothing fills the void in my heart. Nothing feels equivalent. I become increasingly paranoid, feeling as though I am trapped in a nightmare. There are countless individuals surrounding me, yet I do not feel connected to any of them. It has reached a point where I have been exceedingly depressed for the past 3 or 4 months, disinclined to rise from my bed. My daily movement is minimal, with my steps rarely exceeding 1,000. The only thing offering me a modicum of gratification is fast food, which is contributing to my weight gain. I feel pitiable. This may seem pitiable from an outsider's viewpoint, but my heart shattered the day we concluded our relationship for good. I have not been the same person since. What can I possibly do? Story 2. Wedding planning spiraled out of control when my mother insulted my fiancé. He revealed he had secretly sought a prenup from my sister. This will be lengthy as I need to express my thoughts, and I am using an alternate account. Some background information will be crucial before I delve into the main issue. I am a 43-year-old female who met my fiancé, a 34-year-old male, 3 years ago, and we got engaged 6 months ago. My partner was paralyzed in an accident at 23 and has been in a wheelchair since. His father passed away unexpectedly when he was 25, and many relatives placed significant pressure on him, insisting he was now the man of the house and needed to get his act together. He attempted to secure a job at Walmart despite his doctors advising against it. My fiancé suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder due to his accident and has struggled with depression throughout his life, combined with his health issues. The pressure of working in retail while trying to maintain relationships with increasingly distant friends led to a significant decline in his health. He was unable to consistently complete a full shift, but always made an effort to work at least half a day. Unfortunately, Walmart did not accommodate his situation, and corporate mandated his dismissal for attendance issues. He reacted poorly to this news and became very ill, requiring several weeks in the hospital for urosepsis. His mother, still reeling from the loss of her husband, urged him not to work. Although he attempted to return to school, he was unable to arrange for a nurse and home health assistance, ultimately leading him to withdraw. Thus, he was very much isolated and aimlessly moving through life when we crossed paths. I have custody of my teenage nephew following the passing of my younger sister, and one day, on his way home from school, he collided with my fiancé's vehicle. My nephew and his friends panicked upon seeing my fiancé's van overturned, and they fled the scene. When I arrived, others were trying to assist him out of the vehicle. My nephew had never faced a situation like this before, and I found it difficult to manage the circumstances. I cannot recall how many times I called him while waiting for emergency medical services to arrive. When the police finally asked my fiancé what transpired, he falsely claimed he instructed the boys to run to the nearest house for help, which was a lie given that this incident took place in a fairly rural area. I was able to contact the boys and persuade them to return. The police were displeased and reprimanded the boys, but ultimately managed to avoid legal repercussions for abandoning the scene. Against my lawyer's legal counsel, I chose to visit my fiancé in the hospital to express my apologies. Upon entering his room, the expression on his face continues to bring a smile to my face. He looked at me as if I were the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. After some time together and discovering we had much in common, he asked if I would return to see him again before I departed. Before long, I was visiting him daily, and we began dating a few days after he was discharged from the hospital. My mother, aged 65, and my sister, aged 39, have disdained my fiancé since day one. During their initial meeting, my mother interrogated him about his background, his occupation, his education, and his intentions regarding our relationship. I was instantly frustrated, yet my fiancé calmly placed his hand on my leg and answered all her inquiries. She left a $100 bill on the table and exited before her meal even arrived. His expression reflected the meticulously crafted mask he employs when feeling overwhelmed or stressed, but his eyes conveyed sadness and shame as he apologized for not meeting my mother's expectations. I tried to reassure him that I did not care about her opinion and that he was perfect just as he was. Not long after, I received a text from her expressing her disappointment in me and reminding me that I remained a Caldwell and not a charity director for those less fortunate. My mother comes from a wealthy background, the traditional East Coast upper-class type. My sister and I are set to inherit a substantial fortune and assets upon her passing. My parents have positioned me for success since birth, and I currently manage well for myself across various income streams. Hence, my mother perceives herself as some sort of aristocrat. I resent this perspective and generally disregard her attitude. However, her blatant and dismissive remarks towards my fiancé infuriated me, prompting me to go low contact with her for several months. My fiancé began attending therapy sessions with me and gradually emerged from his shell. I educated him on everything necessary to manage one of my businesses. After his first month running it independently, he surprised me with flowers and a simple ruby necklace, expressing that I had given him a sense of purpose and a reason to rise each morning. For the first time since his accident, he felt capable of being a good son and caring for his mother. One evening during dinner, my sister remarked that if I chose to remain with my fiancé, he would only become a parasitic drain on me. From that point onward, I distanced myself from my family and focused on my life with him. When we finally sat down with a wedding planner, we found ourselves in a rare disagreement about inviting my mother and sister to participate in the process. He insisted that regardless of their feelings towards him, they were my family, and it was important he involve them. Against my better judgment, I included them in the wedding group chat, as we are planning for September of 2025. We just had our second meeting with the wedding planner a few days ago, and it devolved into a complete disaster. The wedding planner asked my fiancé about his vision for the wedding, and he shared pictures of a state park about an hour from where we live. It features a beach and a small lagoon fed by the Wapsie River. He had captured photographs of the beach and loaded them onto his tablet, illustrating envisioned chairs arranged on the grass and down to the beach with a red carpet for the aisle. He articulated plans to anchor a small archway in the lagoon for our vows. His excitement was palpable, and it marked the first time he had articulated his dream wedding, which was simple, heartfelt, and entirely him. My mother, however, appeared utterly appalled. My sister looked at me and remarked, "First, you choose a defective man, and now this." I was taken aback and struggled to comprehend her words. She then retrieved a manila envelope from her purse and placed it on the table, directing her gaze at my fiancé. She stated, "This is the prenuptial agreement I drafted after you inquired about one. It is more than fair for someone with nothing." I was instantly enraged and nearly shouted, "Get out, leave." My sister glared at me and stormed out of the room. My mother sighed heavily and addressed us, stating, "My daughter is a Caldwell. She can't just have some low-key wedding. A woman must be special on her wedding day, and my name is the eldest daughter of one of the most influential families on the East Coast. We uphold a particular standard of class. You understand, dear, don't you?" She expressed this as though stating a universally accepted truth, such as the earth being flat. I snapped back, asserting, "What kind of wedding we have is no longer your concern." I turned to the shocked wedding planner and informed her we would need to reschedule the appointment before standing up to leave, hoping to prevent my mother from saying anything further. My fiancé followed me after once again apologizing to the planner. While in the van on the way home, I turned to him and asked if he lacked trust in me or if someone had influenced him, but he confessed he feared potentially failing and financially exploiting me. He revealed he had started repaying his mother after having borrowed from her accounts over the past 9 years. Therapy has been beneficial, and he attempts to make amends, but he feels a long way from trusting himself with the considerable income I generate. When I inquired about the amount he had taken, he admitted it totaled nearly $15,000 over 9 years. I must admit I scoffed slightly. I know his mother likely either never recognized it or simply did not care enough to address it. She had shown me a notebook in which he attempted to keep track of every time he borrowed money since his accident, which indicated he still owed her $1,900. To me, this seems a relatively small sum, but to him, without the position I provided, it would have taken years to repay on disability. I find myself confused about how to feel. I am hurt he went behind my back seeking my sister's assistance with a prenuptial agreement, yet I recognize that is a trivial reason for anger. I feel frustration because, despite everything, he still thinks we should send my mother and sister an invitation, fearing he would appear terrible if he were the reason they missed my wedding. I don't know how to reassure him that he is enough just as he is and that my mother and sister will bring nothing but trouble. This morning, he brought me flowers and donuts at my office and apologized for his actions, but he still believes a prenuptial agreement is a wise idea. Consequently, I am left feeling conflicted. I should probably be upset that he sought my sister's guidance and insists on a prenuptial agreement, but primarily, I feel hurt over how my mother and sister treated the man I love. leaving me confused and angry, but unsure who to direct it toward. My fiancé is remarkably opinionated and resolute, not to the extent of arrogance, but those who know him are well aware of his stances on most issues and where his loyalties lie, given his love for debate. However, in relation to my family, he becomes noticeably meek. Now, how do I proceed from here? Any advice would be appreciated if you managed to read my lengthy account to the conclusion. Story 3. Realizing my mom thinks I wear black out of rebellion, she threatened to kick me out for wanting makeup. I felt crushed and rejected. This is going to be an extensive read, and for that, I apologize. As the title indicates, I dislike even contemplating or confessing this. Honestly, I truly love my mother. She can be incredibly wonderful. I am just starting to recognize that perhaps she is not as wonderful as I previously believed. Or maybe I am simply overanalyzing everything. For context, I am a 21-year-old female, and she is in her 40s. Regardless, my mother and I went to the mall, where we were shopping for clothing for a trip I was taking out of state. To provide some background, I adore the color black, so most of my wardrobe consists of black clothing. I mentioned to her that I was disappointed I had not found any black items that I liked. That was all it took for her to begin her tirade. She claimed that she believed I only wore black to rebel against her. She expressed her disdain for the fact that I do not wear color for her, but would wear it for my boyfriend, as I had purchased some lighter clothing for our trip to Florida during the warm months. It was completely unrelated to him. She stated that black is such a dull color and that she thoroughly disliked my fashion sense. Ouch. I typically wear black short sleeves with designs that appeal to me, paired with either black leggings or jeans. It is nothing extreme. I have consistently worn black since middle school, so it is not something new I decided to adopt. That incident was just one of many confrontations we have had. On another occasion, I mentioned wanting to get a nose piercing and possibly a tattoo because I liked them, and she threatened to kick me out because of it. Additionally, during October, I expressed wanting to experiment a bit with makeup since I usually do not wear any. I typically go without makeup, not that I think there is anything wrong with it. I am just not skilled at applying it. When I was around 16, I asked my mother if I could buy some makeup to try it out, including black lipstick, as I was not fond of red, light pink, or nude shades. Naturally, she refused, insisting she wanted me to look natural. After a few years with the makeup collecting dust, I decided I wanted to apply it the way I liked. At that point, I was about 18 or 19. I began doing my makeup, applying some black eyeshadow, eyeliner, and mascara, and I even used liquid eyeliner as lipstick since I did not have any black lipstick. I honestly enjoyed the look and felt truly happy. I put on a fake nose ring that I had received from my brother's wife, and I started taking selfies, feeling good about my appearance. Suddenly, I heard her footsteps coming upstairs and I froze. I instantly knew what was coming. I turned to face the television, not wanting to witness the disgust on her face. She said, "Hey, my name." I turned to look at her, and she abruptly halted. First came the shock, followed by disgust, then anger. She began yelling at me about not doing that, in her sight, claiming that I was disobeying her and being disrespectful. She said that if I wanted to look that way, I could leave her house. She expressed that she did not want to see me like that and instructed me not to do it around her. Then she went downstairs and started telling my father about the situation. Honestly, it hurt me deeply. She was essentially telling me that I couldn't wear what I wanted or alter my own body. I felt rejected by my mother. The most astonishing aspect of the entire situation is that I was not downstairs in her presence doing it. I was in my own space upstairs. She was not meant to see me wearing makeup. I never intended for her to witness it. I remember taking makeup wipes and scrubbing my face so hard because I feared my father would observe it. Hours later, she came upstairs and gave me a hug, saying sorry. But honestly, I felt indifferent. It seemed like she was merely attempting to appease me. The damage had already been done, you know what I mean. The apology held no significance for me. I also recall the moment I shared with her about my boyfriend for the first time. We are in a long-distance relationship, living on opposite sides of the United States. I remember writing everything down on paper for her to read later. I have always done this since I was a child. I struggle to communicate with her when she becomes upset. It's as if I just shut down. I feel a lump in my throat and can't speak, just listen. Perhaps this stems from my childhood when she would make me sit on the stairs while she yelled at me, and if I attempted to say anything, she would only scream more. I am not entirely sure. In any case, I composed a detailed letter explaining my boyfriend, his location, how long we had been communicating, and our video calls, among other things. After reading the letter, I noticed she became exceedingly hostile and distant towards me. I initially brushed it off. She maintained that demeanor for about 3 to 4 days until she finally declared, "We are discussing this whether you like it or not," telling me she didn't care about my wishes and instructed me to join her at the dinner table at precisely 7. Those were her exact words. Honestly, what was this, a business meeting? Later on, my father called for me to come down, so I complied. She was already seated, tense and visibly angry. I sat down as calmly as possible. She began speaking calmly, so I thought, wow, this might go well, and felt secure enough to share my thoughts and feelings. However, midway through, she interrupted me, starting to yell. I looked at my father for assistance, but he simply stared at the table, saying nothing. I started to feel the lump in my throat again, so I covered my face and focused on my breathing, trying to suppress the urge to yell back at her. Eventually, my father spoke up, prompting my mother to fall silent, allowing me to converse with him. At one point, she left to grab a cigarette from the kitchen, and my father advised me, "Just talk to her. She's taking this really hard, and I think she's on the brink of a mental breakdown. She's been having nightmares about you getting hurt or sold into human trafficking." My mother returned to the table and resumed her verbal assault on me, prompting me to stand and attempt to leave for upstairs. She blocked my path, pushed me back, and insisted, "Absolutely not. You are going to sit down and we are going to discuss this." I stepped back, turned my body sideways, and managed to push past her to go upstairs. For me, the conversation ended as soon as she interrupted and began yelling at me. I had my boyfriend on FaceTime in my room upstairs and asked him if he heard anything, and thankfully, he mostly heard only the occasional loud noise, which was my mother yelling. I could elaborate further about the numerous things she has said to me. What truly solidified my feelings was when I finally met my boyfriend and his family. It felt entirely different. His mother wanted to engage with me and learn about my interests. She cracked jokes and genuinely showed interest in our conversation. She is incredibly supportive, stating that she likes my style and even bought me items featuring designs I love. My current fascination revolves around skeletons. Therefore, she gifted me a book filled with various skeleton posters and a t-shirt featuring a skeleton. She is very kind to me and has instilled the confidence in me to begin wearing the clothes I have always wanted to wear. During my recent visit, she even offered to take me to get my hair dyed and my nose pierced. Both are things I have always aspired to do. She is so different from my mother, and I am coming to realize that the way my parents treat me is not reflective of what I deserve. I feel quite lost at the moment. For some reason, my mother assumes that both my brother and I engage in activities out of spite or as a means of rebellion against her. It seems like if you try to explain anything to her that does not align with her beliefs or contradicts her statements, she immediately resorts to yelling and accusing you of being disrespectful and wrong. For instance, when she discovered that my brother sometimes goes out on weekends with friends and drinks, she suddenly deemed him an alcoholic. At one point, she even accused him of drug use simply because he rarely communicates with her anymore. In truth, my brother is starting a family, while I am saving up to live with my boyfriend. This is a throwaway account, and I have kept details somewhat vague as I have family and friends who use Reddit. If you have read to the very end, I genuinely appreciate it. I realize this was extremely lengthy. I hope you all have a fantastic day. Story 4. I dated a guy who turned abusive during my pregnancy. He manipulated me and later attacked me when I needed help. I felt the need to express everything that has been weighing on me, as I believed it might alleviate my burden. I had a relationship with this individual M, 22, for a few months. Initially, he was quite possessive, showering me with affection and proclaiming his love and infatuation for me. I fell into this admiration, and we began our relationship, but the blissful phase quickly faded after just a few weeks. The first moment that made me reconsider our relationship occurred at a festival when I requested he return to our tent to provide me with warmth. He told me he would come back in 30 minutes. However, I eventually fell asleep. When he woke me, he expected intimacy, but I explained that I was too exhausted. The following day, as we prepared to leave, he became angry, blaming me for not being intimate with him. He frequently made jokes at my expense, and when I expressed my frustration, he dismissed my feelings as overreactions. Things deteriorated after I attended an event that he had explicitly said he did not want me to attend because he wanted to spend time with his male friends. He ended up losing his jacket, which contained his car keys, wallet, phone, and other belongings, and he unjustly blamed me for his loss, stating that if I hadn't been there, it would not have happened. This was particularly frustrating since he was under the influence of various substances. I assisted him in obtaining a new phone, but he changed his behavior entirely. One night, he called and insisted I visit him, but I explained that I was unable to do so, as I had made weekend plans to see him. He began to criticize my lack of spontaneity and threatened to spend the weekend with his friends, claiming I did not prioritize him. I reminded him that I had indeed made plans to see him, and he mentioned that if he contacted his ex, she would come over immediately. This hurt me deeply, and when I became emotional, he dismissed my feelings and said I was overreacting, asserting that other women would find the situation amusing and fight back. As time went on, my interest in him began to wane to the extent that I no longer wished to be intimate. I stayed with him for a few days without engaging in any physical intimacy, explaining that I was feeling depressed and lacked motivation. His response was to suggest we should just be friends, and he lamented that, as a man, he had needs. This made me even more unsure about our relationship. He also had issues with opioid dependency, occasionally using heroin. Upon learning that I was pregnant, he did not seem particularly concerned. He crudely remarked, "You are definitely getting rid of it, right?" and expressed frustration when I mentioned I hadn't visited a clinic for abortion medication, stating that his friends were worried about him being baby-trapped. I felt deeply unsupported and found it difficult to communicate with him, as our conversations caused me anxiety and distress amidst all the chaos in my life. He insisted I speak to him because it was his baby too, but I explained that he was making me feel terrible. One day, he called to inform me he was using fentanyl after deliberately purchasing laced pills, and he began to yell at me for random reasons, questioning who I would let be intimate with me if I wasn't his type. This upset me, leading me to end the conversation. He later called back while driving, claiming he might faint at the wheel, all while I was still coping with my pregnancy and trying to prepare for an abortion. I expressed my concern for him, but he told me he felt beyond saving. I did not have family or friends who could support me during the abortion, so my last option was to go to his place and rely on his mother for care, but the situation turned disastrous. Feeling compelled to speak up, I reached out to his former friend, as I could no longer remain silent, knowing this friend had severed ties with him due to concerns about his behavior. The friend expressed worry for my well-being and suggested I should never have entered a relationship with him. When my ex discovered I confided in his friend, he went into a rage, daring me to end the friendship. I insisted I would not do so, as I did not consider his friend had done anything harmful enough to warrant such action. However, when I arrived at his place for the abortion, he expressed a complete lack of sympathy for my situation, called me a self-centered person, and said he wanted to break up. I had already confided in someone else about my thoughts on ending the relationship, but I thought it was not the right time to do so, which made me feel even more distressed. I informed him I intended to take the medication, and he decided to go to sleep. I took the medication and experienced excruciating pain, which prompted me to wake him and ask about pain relief. His response was to yell at me. In despair, I accidentally consumed an excessive pain medication and texted a friend, expressing my fear of overdose. My friend contacted him, and he reacted by throwing my phone across the room, restraining me on the bed and placing his hands around my neck. I pleaded with him to let me go, and he demanded to know what I had taken. When I told him, he insulted me, labeling me an attention seeker, and ordered me to leave his house. The following day, his friend checked on me, and I finally shared everything that transpired, overwhelmed by my emotions and shocked by his treatment of me after I had communicated my trauma regarding abuse. His friend chose to distance himself from him after learning the truth, while my ex accused me of ruining his life, claiming his inappropriate actions were merely a trauma response. I found myself still communicating with him, believing I had formed a trauma bond, and he attempted to manipulate me into resolving issues on his behalf. I made efforts, but nothing seemed to improve. Out of remorse, I sent him £100 for something he needed, but he continued to talk down to me. When I expressed a desire to attend an event, he yelled during our phone conversation, accusing me of invading his life and claiming it was his scene, while insisting his ex did not want me at the event either. I finally confronted him about the trauma he inflicted on me, but he callously told me to suck it up and referred to me as merely a fling. Eventually, I reached the breaking point, informing him that I would no longer remain silent regarding his treatment of me. I confided in my friends about what I had endured, and this ultimately reached the community he frequented, resulting in his ostracism from that group. Although I have spoken to him since then, he expressed a hopelessness about life, yet never truly acknowledged the harm he caused me, attempting to deflect blame by saying he merely shook my collarbone and insisting we were both at fault in the relationship. While I do feel some sympathy for him, I cannot shake the feeling that he did not deserve such support, and I fear for his well-being. But I also recognize that he has not learned any lessons from this situation. It hurts to feel like a ruinous force in someone's life.